"Let me dance with your daughter. I'll make her walk again," the dirty boy whispered to the millionaire. Harrison Sterling exploded in cruel laughter. "You? A street rat who can barely afford shoes?" But when the boy took the wheelchair-bound girl's hand, what happened next froze every heart in that mansion and changed their lives forever. The autumn rain had stopped hours ago, but 12-year-old Daniel Rivers was still soaked to the bone. His shoes, if you could call them that, were held together with wire and hope, squeaking with each step as he walked along the pristine sidewalk of Millionaire's Row, leaving muddy footprints on concrete that probably cost more per square foot than his entire neighborhood. He didn't belong here. Every fiber of his being screamed that truth. The mansions towering on either side of him were fortresses of wealth, each one more intimidating than the last. Manicured lawns stretched like green oceans. Luxury cars sat in driveways like sleeping panthers. Security cameras tracked his movement with silent judgment. But Daniel kept walking, clutching the crumpled flyer in his pocket. The paper was damp, the ink smudged, but he'd memorized every word weeks ago. Autumn charity gala at Sterling Manor. Entertainment and performances welcome. All talented youth encouraged to audition. All talented youth. The words had burned themselves into his brain. They hadn't said, all wealthy youth, or all properly dressed youth. Just talented. And Daniel had one talent, the only thing in his life that made sense, that made him feel whole. He could dance. Not the formal ballet taught in expensive studios. Not the carefully choreographed routines from private schools. Daniel danced like the wind moved, like water flowed, like music became physical. He'd learned in the streets, in abandoned warehouses, in any space where he could move freely. His teachers had been YouTube videos watched on library computers, street performers who'd taken pity on a skinny kid with hungry eyes, and his own relentless practice. When Daniel danced, he wasn't poor. He wasn't the kid whose father had abandoned them before he was born. He wasn't the son of a mother working 3 jobs who still couldn't keep the lights on. He was just movement and music and pure, perfect freedom. Sterling Manor loomed ahead, a 3-story masterpiece of stone and glass that looked like it had been transplanted from a European castle. Daniel's stomach twisted with familiar anxiety. The security guard at the gate was already watching him, hand moving toward his radio. "Stop right there!" the guard called out, stepping into Daniel's path. His nameplate read, Officer Mitchell, and his expression read, "You don't belong here." "I'm here for the audition," Daniel said, pulling out the flyer with trembling fingers. "For the gala. It says all talented youth." "Let me see that." Mitchell snatched the flyer, examining it like it might be counterfeit. His eyes traveled from the paper to Daniel's face, down to his broken shoes, back up to his second-hand jacket that was 2 sizes too small. "This is for legitimate performers, not street kids looking to cause trouble." "I'm not here to cause trouble," Daniel said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I'm a dancer. I just want a chance to audition." "A dancer?" Mitchell's laugh was sharp and mean. "Boy, look at yourself. You're filthy. You probably haven't had a proper meal in days. The Sterling Gala is one of the most prestigious events in the city. They have professional performers, trained artists, people with actual credentials." Each word was a hammer blow, but Daniel had heard worse. Much worse. "The flyer says all talented youth are encouraged." "I know what the flyer says," Mitchell interrupted. "But it also assumes a basic level of presentability. You can't just walk into Harrison Sterling's home looking like you crawled out of a dumpster." The mansion's front door opened, and Daniel's heart nearly stopped. A girl emerged, being pushed in a wheelchair by a nurse. She was maybe 10 years old, with long hair that caught the afternoon light. But it was her eyes that captured Daniel's attention. Sad eyes, old eyes, eyes that had seen too much pain for someone so young. Sophia Sterling. Even Daniel, who knew nothing about high society, had heard her story. The daughter of Harrison Sterling, the real estate mogul worth billions. 2 years ago, she'd been in a car accident that had killed her mother and left her paralyzed from the waist down. The tabloids had covered it obsessively. Photos of the grieving father carrying his wheelchair-bound daughter. Stories about the best doctors money could buy who still couldn't help her walk again. Sophia's gaze found Daniel, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. Her expression shifted, curiosity replacing the boredom that had been there seconds before. "Who's that?" Sophia asked the nurse, pointing directly at Daniel. The nurse, a stern-looking woman named Mrs. Chen, frowned. "No one, dear. Just someone who got lost." "I'm not lost," Daniel said, finding courage he didn't know he had. "I'm here to audition for the gala." Sophia's eyes widened. "You're a performer?" "I'm a dancer." "Sophia, we need to go back inside," Mrs. Chen said firmly, beginning to turn the wheelchair. "Wait." Sophia's voice carried surprising authority for someone so young. "I want to see him dance." "Miss Sterling, your father would not approve of—" "My father isn't here right now." Sophia looked directly at Daniel. "Can you really dance, or are you just saying that?" Daniel's hands were shaking. This wasn't how he'd imagined this going. He'd pictured a formal audition, judges sitting at a table, a proper stage, not performing in a driveway for a girl in a wheelchair while a security guard glared at him. But something in Sophia's eyes called to him. A loneliness he recognized. A desperate need for something, anything, real and beautiful in a life that had become defined by limitations and tragedy. "I can dance," Daniel said quietly. "I don't have music, but I don't need it. The music is always there if you know how to listen." Officer Mitchell stepped forward. "Okay, that's enough. I'm calling this in. You need to leave before— Let him show me." Sophia's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "1 minute. If he's lying, then Officer Mitchell can escort him away. But if he's telling the truth—" She paused, and for the first time, something like hope flickered across her face. "If he's telling the truth, then I want him to audition for the gala." Mrs. Chen looked deeply uncomfortable, but she also clearly knew better than to argue with Sophia Sterling. "1 minute," she said to Daniel. "Then you leave." Daniel nodded. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He stepped back, giving himself space, and closed his eyes. The world fell away. The mansion, the security guard, the watching eyes, all of it dissolved. Daniel heard the music that was always playing in his head, felt the rhythm in his bones, and began to move. He'd once seen a documentary about water, how it could be gentle or fierce, how it could carve through stone or nurture life. That's what Daniel tried to capture in his movement. He flowed across the driveway, his body telling a story without words. Every gesture precise yet organic, every turn controlled yet wild. He forgot about his broken shoes, forgot about the mud on his clothes, forgot about everything except the pure joy of movement. This was who he was. This was the only thing that had ever made sense in his chaotic, difficult life. When he stopped, breathing hard, the world snapped back into focus. Sophia's hands were pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Chen looked stunned. Even Officer Mitchell had gone quiet, his earlier hostility replaced by reluctant amazement. "How did you learn to move like that?" Sophia whispered. "I taught myself," Daniel said simply. "I've been dancing since I was 5. "It's the only thing I'm good at." Before Sophia could respond, a voice cut through the moment like a knife. "What exactly is going on here?" Daniel turned to see a man striding down the mansion's front steps, and he knew immediately this was Harrison Sterling. The photos didn't do him justice, or maybe they did him too much credit. He was tall, imposing, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Daniel's mother made in 6 months. His face was handsome in a harsh way, all sharp angles and cold calculation, but it was his eyes that made Daniel's blood run cold. They were empty, not angry or cruel, just profoundly empty, like looking into windows of an abandoned house. "Daddy!" Sophia's voice brightened. "You have to see this boy dance. He's amazing. He should be in the gala." Harrison's gaze moved to Daniel, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. His lip curled in an expression that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite a sneer. "This child," Harrison said the word like it tasted bad, "was trespassing on private property?" "Sir, I tried to send him away," Officer Mitchell said quickly, clearly afraid. "But Miss Sophia wanted to see him perform, and I thought—" "You're not paid to think, Mitchell. You're paid to keep undesirable elements away from my home." Harrison walked closer to Daniel, circling him like a predator examining prey. "Look at you. Filthy clothes. Broken shoes. You probably haven't bathed in days. And you have the audacity to come to my home, to present yourself to my daughter, looking like something that crawled out of the gutter." Each word was designed to wound, and they hit their marks perfectly. Daniel felt shame burning through him, hot and acidic. "Daddy, stop," Sophia said, her earlier joy evaporating. "He can dance, really dance. You should have seen—" "I don't need to see anything," Harrison interrupted, not even looking at his daughter. His eyes stayed locked on Daniel. "I can see everything I need to see. This is clearly some street urchin who thinks he can con his way into our home, probably planning to steal whatever he can get his hands on." "I'm not a thief," Daniel said, his voice shaking but determined. "I'm a dancer. I came here because the flyer said—" "I know what the flyer said," Harrison cut him off. "It was my wife's idea, years ago. She believed in giving opportunities to talented youth." He said the words mockingly. "She had a bleeding heart for lost causes. But my wife is dead, and I've learned that most people who claim to be talented are simply delusional." The cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. Daniel had faced bullies before, had dealt with people who looked down on him for being poor. But Harrison Sterling's contempt was on another level entirely. It was surgical, precise, designed to destroy. "Let me tell you what I see," Harrison continued, his voice dropping to something almost conversational, which somehow made it worse. "I see a dirty child who's probably practiced a few moves from videos, who thinks that qualifies as talent. I see someone who doesn't understand that real art requires training, discipline, resources, things you clearly don't have and never will have." "You didn't see him dance," Sophia protested, tears in her voice now. "Daddy, please, just watch him for 1 minute." "Sophia, that's enough." Harrison's tone shifted when addressing his daughter. Still cold, but with an edge of something that might have been love, buried deep beneath layers of ice. "You don't understand these things. This boy is trying to take advantage of your kind nature." Daniel should have left. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, walk away, save whatever dignity he had left. But something made him speak. "Let me dance with your daughter." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Harrison Sterling's head snapped toward Daniel, his expression shifting from contempt to genuine shock. "What did you just say?" Daniel's heart was racing, but he forced himself to continue. "Let me dance with Sophia. I've seen her eyes. She's trapped, not just in that wheelchair, but in loneliness. I know what that feels like. Let me show her that movement is more than walking. Let me teach her that she can still dance, even if she can't walk." Harrison's face went through several rapid changes: shock, disbelief, and then something that looked almost like rage. "You arrogant little—" He stopped himself, taking a visible breath. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly calm. "You think you can help my daughter? You, a street rat who probably doesn't even have a home to go back to, think you have something to offer, Sophia Sterling?" "I think everyone has something to offer," Daniel said, surprised by his own courage. "And I think Sophia deserves to feel joy again, to feel like she's more than her wheelchair." For a moment, just a fraction of a second, something flickered in Harrison's eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. But it was gone so fast Daniel might have imagined it. "You want to dance with my daughter?" Harrison asked, and his smile was the cruelest thing Daniel had ever seen. "Fine, I'll make you a deal. The gala is in 2 weeks. If you can perform, truly perform, not just flail around like you probably did for Sophia, if you can prove that you have actual talent and not just the delusions of a desperate child, then yes, you can dance with my daughter." Daniel's breath caught. "Really?" "Really," Harrison confirmed. "But when you fail, and you will fail, I want you to never come back here. I want you to accept that you don't belong in this world, that you never will belong, and that the sooner you accept your place in life, the less disappointment you'll face." It was a trap. Daniel knew it was a trap. Harrison Sterling was setting him up to fail publicly, to crush whatever hope he dared to kindle. But Daniel also knew he had no choice. "I accept," he said. Harrison's smile widened. "Excellent. The audition is this Saturday, 3 p.m. Don't be late." He turned to Officer Mitchell. "Escort this boy off the property, and make sure he understands that if he shows up looking like he does now, he won't make it past the gate." As Mitchell grabbed Daniel's arm, not roughly, but firmly, Sophia called out, "Wait, what's your name?" Daniel looked back at her, at this girl who'd shown him more kindness in 5 minutes than most people showed him in months. "Daniel," he said. "Daniel Rivers." "I'll see you at the audition, Daniel Rivers," Sophia said. And despite everything, she was smiling. Show my father what real dancing looks like. As Officer Mitchell walked Daniel back to the gate, Harrison Sterling watched them go, his expression unreadable. "Daddy," Sophia said quietly, "why were you so mean to him?" Harrison looked at his daughter, at the wheelchair that had become her prison, at the sadness that had taken up permanent residence in her eyes since the accident that had stolen her mother and her ability to walk. "Because the world is mean, Sophia," he said, "and it's better she learns that from me than from strangers who'll hurt her worse." But as he turned back to the mansion, Harrison Sterling felt something he hadn't felt in years, a tiny splinter of doubt, because that dirty boy had moved with a grace that money couldn't buy, and for just a moment, Harrison had seen his daughter smile. And that terrified him more than he would ever admit. The community center on Maple Street had seen better days, probably around the time Daniel was born. The paint was peeling, the windows were cracked, and the heating system worked only when it felt like it. But it had one thing that made it invaluable: a large empty room with a mirror along one wall and enough space to move. Daniel had been coming here since he was 7, sneaking in through the back entrance that never quite locked properly. The staff knew he was there. Mrs. Washington, who ran the after-school programs, had caught him once, and instead of kicking him out, had simply said, "Don't break anything, and clean up after yourself." Now, 5 days after his encounter with Harrison Sterling, Daniel was here every moment he wasn't in school or helping his mother. The audition was approaching like a storm on the horizon, and he had never felt more unprepared. "You're going to wear yourself out." Daniel stopped mid-movement, breathing hard. Mrs. Washington stood in the doorway, holding 2 bottles of water. She was in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that had seen every kind of hardship, but somehow remained kind. "I can't wear myself out," Daniel said, accepting the water gratefully. "I have to be perfect." "Perfect is impossible, honey. You know that." Mrs. Washington settled into one of the folding chairs along the wall. "I've been watching you dance for 5 years. You're already better than most professionals I've seen. What's really going on?" Daniel sat down hard on the floor, his legs finally giving out. "I made a stupid promise to a girl in a wheelchair. I told her I could teach her to dance even though she can't walk. And her father," his voice cracked, "her father is setting me up to fail, so he can prove that people like me don't belong in his world." "Harrison Sterling," Mrs. Washington said, and it wasn't a question. Daniel looked up, surprised. "You know him?" "I know of him. Everyone in this city knows of him. Brilliant businessman, ruthless negotiator, and from what I hear, a man who died inside the day his wife did." Mrs. Washington's expression was thoughtful. "He used to be different, you know, before the accident." "Different how?" "Kinder. His wife, Margaret, she was the heart of their family. She ran charity programs, volunteered at hospitals, genuinely cared about making the world better. Harrison supported her, loved her, built his empire partially to fund her causes." Mrs. Washington sighed. "Then the accident happened. Margaret died instantly. Sophia survived but lost the use of her legs. And Harrison lost himself." Daniel absorbed this, trying to reconcile it with the cold, cruel man who'd humiliated him. "That doesn't excuse how he treated me." "No, it doesn't," Mrs. Washington agreed. "Pain isn't an excuse for cruelty, but understanding where someone's cruelty comes from can help you navigate it." She leaned forward. "Daniel, why did you really offer to dance with his daughter?" The question caught Daniel off guard. He'd been asking himself the same thing for 5 days. "Because," he said slowly, working through his thoughts, "when I looked at her, I saw myself. Trapped, invisible, desperate for something, anything, that would make her feel alive again." He looked down at his hands, calloused from years of practice. "When I dance, I'm free, even if it's just for a few minutes.